So, who are you and what do you do?
You're stealing my thing now, eh?
Yeah.
My name is Mitch. I'm the president of Twist Image, digital marketing agency, and I have two books. One is called 6 Pixels of Separation, and the latest one, there it is. And the latest one is called CTRL ALT DELETE. You got that one too? Good job. You're
Right
doing
there.
well. Well, you have the galley. We should get you the
Yes.
hardcovers. Those are now available. And I've got a blog and podcast also called 6 Pixels of Separation, and I'm happy to be talking to you, Tom.
Thanks so much, Mitch. I really appreciate it. And I did steal your intro because I'm a big fan of your 6 Pixels of Separation podcast that comes out every Sunday. It's really about marketing, but it's really about so much more. And it really helps. I love listening into the conversations about what's happening, what's on the cutting edge. There's so many different angles, so many different guests you have on there. And I respect your thinking in that area. And I really wanted to have you on this show so that we could talk about what's happening in that space and provide a little insight for CIOs, IT leaders that are out there in the industry, because more and more there's a convergence of what the CMO is doing, what the CIO is doing, and actually, to jump right into it, in your second book, you're calling it Purgatory, right? So we're in this weird interim space. 6 Pixels of Separation kind of said, hey, this is coming. Now Control Alt Delete is like, hey, it's here. What are you going to do? And we're in this temporary weird space. Could you tell me about Purgatory and what you see happening in this space?
Yeah, I mean, if I go back 15 years in my career, my general sort of meetings would be sitting down with a bunch of C-level executives, and they would inevitably lean in and say, so tell us why we need a website, like walk us through what that means. And when I sort of think about that moment in time, what you quickly realize is that they were saying it not because it was here and everybody was using the web. It's because the web could have been a fad. I mean, back then it could have been something that didn't come to fruition. And so suddenly you're making significant investments in an area that you're not necessarily comfortable with. If you frame it in that time frame, early 2000s, you had IT controlling the web properties and the mobile properties. To a certain extent, we still have that. And you had marketers who were scared of the IT guys and didn't want to have to be involved in technology. And you fast forward to today, and you look at things like Gartner and Forrester, and they're reporting. We'll see if it happens that the CMO is going to be spending more on technology than the CIO. So we could talk about that later. But so that idea of is the web for real, to me is hell. It was hell because I had a vision, maybe you had a vision too, for what it could be, but you had to convince, you had to evangelize that it was going to be something. Trust me. You fast forward to where we are today, and if I were to say to you, do you think mobile is for real? Do you think social media is for real? Do you think local is for real? Do you think big data is for real? Do you think real time is for real? You could go on, and you would say unequivocally, it's for real. This stuff isn't a fad. It is here. It's a reality. And so if you know it's a reality and you're not acting on it as you should be, that's purgatory. Hell would be not knowing if it's ever going to happen. Purgatory is knowing fundamentally at your core that it's happened, it's done, but not doing enough or anything about it. So that's really the idea here, is to sort of frame it and say, if it's purgatory, all you can do is stand and wait, because that's what purgatory is, or you can make plans, you can be decisive, you can do things, little things, medium things, big things, to create the path towards that promised land. So that for me was the fundamental catalyst in even why I wrote a second book.
So, why is that needed? Why is that necessary? I'm thinking about our conversation today, and I was thinking it's like waking my kids up for school, right? It's like, hey, school starts at X time, let's go, and now they're sleeping in, and I'm waking them up. This Control Alt Delete feels like you're really kind of shaking the kids to wake them up. Why do people need that? Why is there so much resistance if it's so obvious?
Well, I don't know if it's so obvious. I think that there are instances in time where you sort of know it, but you're just caught up in the day-to-day of what the world is, and it's hard. So in the book, what I did is I tried to simplify it. It wasn't like all this stuff you're not doing. It was, there are 5 fundamental movements that have taken place that brands are just not doing anything or very little about. And these are not scary things. They're actually areas of opportunity. They're areas that would take you from that classic bloody Red Sea into the blue ocean, into that place where you have no competition or you're doing your own thing. But the big catalyst of the book is, and I broke it up into two parts. The first part is called Reboot Business, which is about those 5 movements. And the second part, which is called Reboot You, and that's the part that where I think you're really sort of scratching into is, what do I need to do to be employable? And employable could be the entrepreneur, the intrapreneur, or just I'm working as a C-level executive or director in an organization. But what do I have to do to be viable in that environment? And I think that's the thing, is that people go to work with their brains and knowing full well that I do all this stuff. But the second they get to work, they're like, oh, does anybody do this? Like mobile apps. Does anyone use mobile apps? It's like, yeah, we use mobile apps that are good, not the ones that suck. So yeah, we do.
Yeah, you had a great example that brought that home for me in the book when you personalized the experience of using Facebook and the experience of using Google. And it's clear as day, as you know, I search Google, I'm looking for something, I'm trying to solve a problem, and in Facebook I'm trying to share a photo of my kids with my friends or whatever. And we go to work and we sort of forget that at the door. Somehow we think that Facebook is different than my personal experience. So I find it interesting that we're at this point where we're all using and experiencing it. So the folks who said they'd never be on Facebook are now on Facebook, and so on and so forth. But so let's say I'm drinking the Kool-Aid and I'm sold on this. There's still a lot of resistance within the organization. What do you see the folks that are leading the change within an organization? What are they doing that other folks aren't, or how are they successful, or what are the things that they've done that they've failed that we should avoid? Any advice there?
Well, I'll give you 2 frameworks for this. My first framework is I'll talk you through some of the things I've seen. My second framework is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what someone has done in one organization as some sort of benchmark or case study for your success. The real impetus here is, what are you willing to do within your organization? And I always say that the catalyst shouldn't be, well, how did they do it successfully? The catalyst should be, I have to do this if I want to survive. So I sort of don't like the whole, this is what Zappos did, so be like Zappos, because you're never going to be like Zappos. And even if I chose an industry that's in your industry and gave you the case study, it's irrelevant. It's different people, it's different cultures, it's different products, it's different philosophies. That all being said, is typically somebody senior in the organization says, we are living in a post-PC world. We are living in a post-web browser world. We are living in things I talk about, a one-screen world. We are living in a world where we can create utility in the marketing and communications that we make. Why is it that we are acting as if we're not? And at the beginning of those conversations will hopefully come the catalyst for people to start doing little incremental things to change the philosophy, to change a little bit of the culture. But none of that happens or will ever happen if it's like, well, let's wait and see what our competitors do.
Yeah,
Do you really think the best companies in the world sit back and go, let's see who has the case study for this? Or does somebody within the organization go, I have a vision? And the reason I say that, and I'm not trying to belittle the question at all, it's because I believe, and I talk about it in the book, that the people who get things right, the people that we admire most, are the people who aren't doing what everyone else is doing in their industry, but they are people who have a vision for what the industry should be. And that little sort of semantic whirligig of words makes all the difference between being an Apple or being a Dell.
And so, for those that need additional convincing, is it these little pockets of innovation, these what Peter Sims would call little bets, way of showing proof? Is that what you've seen to convince some of the other most senior people in the organization how to sort of buy into the concept and recognize it?
Sometimes you see big, sometimes you see really small. I mean, I don't think that there's one proven way that does it. I think if you are a very risk-adverse organization, marketing optimization as a fundamental or foundational strategy is smart. Our website doesn't work. Let's rebuild the website. Why? What doesn't work? What analytics are you capturing? What have you done to optimize that? Where is the customer in the sales funnel when they come to you? What's the path to purchase? How clear are you making the path? I could go on and on and on about this, where our gut is, let's redo the logo. It's like the most irrational reactions.
Yeah, let's put a banner ad on the website. That's how we monetize it. So sometimes I think that a lot of the fun stuff doesn't happen because everybody's swamped with the day-to-day and they buy into that concept that we're overwhelmed and it's okay to be overwhelmed and it's okay to ignore the big stuff. That's getting harder and harder to do, I think, to remain competitive and for those of us that want to be in a leadership position. And I want to get back into this CIO CMO relationship and some of the dynamics you see happening there, because I totally agree with what you're saying before. You can't take a case study and apply it. And I've taught at the graduate level, and I get these case studies and I cringe a little bit, honestly, because I'm like, well, this isn't the real world. So I get that every instance is unique, but I think there might be some general themes you could teach us about CMO, CIO, CTO, what's happening in that realm, and what sort of collaboration is happening or not.
So, when it comes to collaborations are also sort of an area of real interest to me. And you sort of go like collaborate, it's the big, I don't know if collaboration is the big thing anymore. I think it's like we're always collaborating. The CIO walks over to the CMO's office and they have their weekly meeting. What's interesting me most now, especially when you look at that convergence of technology and marketing, is multidisciplinary. So now you're seeing things like a chief creative technologist or like, a chief marketing technologist. And I like this idea of multidisciplinary as a way in which to truly build collaboration within the organization. So what does a multidisciplinary looks like? Looks like it could be a CIO or it could be someone beneath them who has design skills or user interface skills or analytics insights, and that they're not being shut down because, well, they're in IT, so their opinion doesn't matter. It's a world where you're actually allowing the people who are talented within the organization to bring their whole brain to work, to not just bring that little vertical part of it. So I'm the guy here where someone would say, well, you're not on the creative team. And I would say, what does that mean? Or like, you're not on the strategy team. What does that mean?
So that's interesting. It's an interesting thought, because I don't know what to make of these titles, but I think you're suggesting calling it what it is a little bit powerful in having it recognized sort of organizationally that they are multidisciplinary.
Yeah, I don't know if it's title specific though, meaning I could have a front end developer who has significant creative skills that you want sitting in the room as a front end developer when you're doing the creative idea, because they're living this stuff. They're the potential client target market. They are the people who are most passionate about it. So I don't necessarily think you've got to apply the title to make it so. I think you need a culture within the organization that says, while we are collaborating, and we damn well better be collaborating, we also want to embrace the multidisciplinary skill sets of the individuals here, give them access to the other departments, let them see how it operates so that they could facilitate the people's jobs who are within those departments. And listen, I have 100+ people in 2 physical offices, and we struggle with it daily. We struggle with that education, that encouragement, because we get trapped in our worlds. That's not my problem type of thing, right? But I do think in the modern world, in the connected world, you can have this. I mean, the conversation you and I are having right now is very symbolic of that type of relationship that I'm talking about. I mean, it would be much nicer if there was, and that we could sit there on the at a cafe and have a talk. But this feels very real to me. This doesn't feel like we are thousands of miles away. It doesn't feel like we're not connecting. I move my Skype screen up so that I'm looking into your eyes. Hopefully now you're looking into my eyes. And it is a very real way to collaborate and to share that compresses the traditional hurdles we've had to make things like multidisciplinary actions take place.
It does, but I was just wondering, I totally agree with the culture statement, but I was wondering if the titling could help reinforce that the culture is changing within this organization, let's say. There's some
Yeah.
acknowledgement, because it can feel awkward. Hey, you're not supposed to do that. You're the IT guy. Or, hey, what's the marketing guy doing in the data center? Like, that's not right. I just think a level of acknowledgement can help maybe prod or reinforce the culture that you're trying. Because I think what you're talking about is a cultural change for most institutions. So you mentioned Zappos before. If we looked at HubSpot in the Boston area, or any of these companies that were born in the last 10 or 15 years, they're rebuilt under a different foundation. But for those of us in organizations that have been around 20, 30, 40, 100 years, this is a culture change.
Yeah, and I don't know if that really works. Like, you have to be very cautious that you can truly create cultural change. It is a very hard, long process, and I don't think it's driven by process. I think it's actually driven by acceptance of everybody who's there, that this is the way we fundamentally work and believe, and that is very different or diametrically opposed sometimes to where we were last month. It's not easy. That's not intuitive. It doesn't just happen.
That's what I'm seeing, and it's incredible how exciting some things are that you paint in your books, and it's frustrating how hard it is to move that forward. But I saw something recently about Eric Schmidt's new book, saw the video trailer, and they point out there's going to be 5 billion new users brought onto the internet in the next 10 years. So this is going to be inevitable, but when is it that we get that cultural shift at the highest levels of the organization? I guess I'm wondering.
Yeah, and I would provoke that Eric Schmidt thought by saying it's not happening on the desktop.
Right.
It's also happening in the palm of our hands, and it's happening with connectivity. That while Google will be pushing their fiber optics and things like that, we all know that the real push is going to be happening on an Android device. It's going to be on a mobile device. So when you think about it from that perspective too, it fundamentally changes. That's some of the stuff I talk about as well in the book, this idea that I am not always me, right? So when I'm sitting here with you on Skype, it's very different than when I'm doing a FaceTime in a store because someone has a quick video chat that they need to have a call over. Or when I'm, you talked about earlier about me on Google versus me on Facebook. When I'm intent driven and I'm searching for something really quickly, I'm different on Google on my desktop, on my MacBook Air right now than I am when I'm in the car and I need to do a quick Google search. In fact, I would say my funnel is completely different. When I'm searching on the web, I'm starting up here with an idea and I'm sort of drilling down into it. When I start with mobile, I need that right search result right at the top, and then if I want to drill down more, it's a completely different funnel. When I'm on Facebook, I'm trying to share. I'm not necessarily intent on looking for a specific brand or product. So all of those dynamics, in order to sort of reach that C-level, they're so part of the reason why I wrote the book, and I think Eric Schmidt's book is amazing, he wrote with Jared Cohn as well, is that it's sort of a book that doesn't scare the crap out of you. And the reason I wrote my book is because I wanted to create a book where we're sitting here on the couch having a conversation about things that have happened that I want you to be aware of. And I'm going to give it to you in business parlance so that you can pick it up and run with it versus being like, well, now I'm just more intimidated and I don't know where to go with it.
So I can't help but wonder if we're missing that to some extent in IT, because you talk about mobile and it's inevitable. You talked about that's where the future is, the end of the PC era, and the sales reports are showing that this year. But in IT, the conversation is about bring your own device and how this is the biggest threat to the organization. We've got to be secure. We've got to lock it down. And I think there's this sometimes a real struggle with that responsibility balanced with, well, hey, this is where our customers are going to be. And a couple of things you brought out in the book that were really important to think about was a direct relationship and utility as an offering. So it's not ads, it's utility. Now, when you get into that space, I mean, IT's got to be involved in that. We're talking about connecting into our back-end systems and to really deliver utility to folks through our organizations. I see a lot of collaboration that needs to happen there, but I don't know if you could talk about the direct relationship and utility aspects a little bit. That'd be great.
Well, the idea behind direct relationships is that every corporation's most amazing power is their ability to have the direct relationship with the customer. It's what makes you have it over the competitors. What's changed in the past little while is the food chain of it. So what we have now is a world where if I buy a pair of headphones at a national retailer, and the retailers tell me to like them on Facebook, if you just look at that little line of connections, Mitch, stupid guy, buys a $150 pair of headphones, and suddenly I've liked the brand, the retailer, and I'm on Facebook. It's a lot of marketing messages for one consumer to have. And so the question that I provoke in the book is who should have the direct relationship? Should it be the brand, the retailer, or the actual social network, Facebook? And the answer to the question is yes. Whoever is engaged in it should do their best to have the direct relationship, because I think at the end of the day, the only thing that matters in business is if you have the direct relationship with the customer. Because of all the pressures on us now, it's not just against the competitors, it's the people in our own business line. And that's a massive challenge that's facing business that we have to everyone has to deal with. And I think the answer to that is, great content and how you're connecting and all that sort of thing. The other part of it is utility, which is, yeah, you could create a mobile app that's our coupons and our opening hours and our catalogs and all these things. I think you can get that anywhere. I think that's sort of table stakes. What's interesting to me is the fact that you can create something that's actually utility. The reason why we don't download and use a lot of these branded apps is because they're narcissistic, right? They're about the brand. Look at me. This is how much our stuff is. Buy from us, call us. Great. But the apps that we do use are apps that provide us with utility in our lives. They augment our lives. They make our lives better. And there is absolutely no reason why brands can't create things like that that connect the dots better so that you have a more egalitarian-based brand narrative, so that you're telling your story across multiple platforms in unique ways that are adding value to the customer experience and building you towards better, loyalty, engagement, purchase, whatever it might be.
It's interesting when you talk about the bad brand apps. It reminds me of, I don't know if I have the book here, but the inbound marketing that the HubSpot guys wrote. And in the beginning, they have a cartoon of the guy sitting at work all day sending out direct mail pieces. Like, this is the greatest thing. This is going to bring in so much business. And then he goes home and he gets all the junk mail in his mailbox. And he's like, what is this junk? And he throws it away.
Right.
And I think that's, what you're talking about with some of these narcissistic brand apps. I think we tend to make those same mistakes. And another part of the book I wanted to get to before we run out of time was, you have some advice for personal career management and this idea of, sort of a squiggly path, and rather than a linear trajectory or something that's stair-steppy, this squiggly path. And so, for the individual in this space, what are the, what's the advice for success to be comfortable with the squiggly path and to navigate it successfully?
The thing with squiggle is this. I had a friend of mine who was in a similar space as the IT world. She was an engineer, very successful, was doing well. We had lunch one day, and she was genuinely down about life and where she was at. And I said, well, tell me, what's going on? She was like, if I think back, it's like I was sort of good in math in high school and kind of okay in science. And the guidance counselor said, why don't you try this? And she's like, so I did. And post high school, went into college and university and did some science and engineering and math and did okay and path and was going fine. Eventually got a job, moved up, did that, and was like, now what? And I said, I just sort of off the cuff said something like, it's amazing that this random choice you made when you were 16 has suddenly had this massive implications on your life. And her jaw sort of hit the floor. And I realized that what I had said to her was really powerful in terms of our lives. It's the fact that you want to go back and see some pictures of you when you were 16, Tom? We all made some really bad choices back then. We were kids. What did we know? If I knew now what I knew, if I knew then what I knew now type of scenario. And when you then start sort of taking that idea and saying, well, who has the most interesting careers? Who are the people I model myself after? When I started looking at it, because we all go through that moment of self-reflection, what I realized is that the people that I admire most, none of them had that. They all had really squiggly careers. It's they went to do this thing in the music industry and that didn't work out, so they hopped over to media, and then they sort of picked up some IT stuff, and it's if you even looked at mine, it's mine isn't about the jobs that I've had, it's I've switched careers. And then if you sort of frame that and look at what we're seeing now in terms of research for this generation, which I think Fast Company so eloquently called Generation Flux, it's this idea that it's not about 6 or 7 jobs. These people are going to switch careers 6 or 7 times. And I'm a bit older, but basically that's what I had as well. And so I'm not encouraging people who are watching this to quit your job and change your career. What I'm saying is that it is way more socially acceptable to have a squiggly career. And the people that we typically admire most don't have very linear careers. What does that tell you?
Yeah, and I think there's no reason why you can't be okay with taking those endeavors. And, you can hold down your daytime job and have endeavors in other spaces that you love and enjoy. And that's kind of what I've tried to do with my career. So I used to always be pretty linear, always insisted on having a 5-year vision and a goal. And then once I achieved most of the ones I set out, I was sort of struggling with what to do next and starting to follow your passion. And I got into the marketing social media space, ended up teaching some courses at the local university in that realm. And it's very rewarding and fulfilling. And then it weirdly ends up really serving my career well. And I am somewhat envious of these people that have a more direct opportunity, although this is making an excuse for myself, but really the future of kind of having a portfolio approach and getting even beyond that series of jobs, like you said, that you might have at one point in time a portfolio that is made up of elements from what would look like 3 different careers or something. Yeah. And it's really fascinating.
It's a brave new world, and the way in which we approach work and we collaborate and multidisciplinary and how we guide our careers has fundamentally changed. So when I came to writing CTRL ALT DELETE, I was I wanted to create a book that at least cleared the brush in this purgatory thing, and I'm hopeful it strikes a chord. I'm glad it did with you, and having sort of the pre stuff happen now, it seems like it's working, and I'm just hopeful people take it and embrace it and run with it.
And one of the ways you give them a piece of advice you give them to run with that is presentation skills. And you spent a little bit of time of that in the book in that section about personal rebooting. And this is, I see bad presentations almost every day, right? It's an epidemic, but to me, it was a great piece of advice because it's one of the key things. You could sit there and have great ideas. If you can't communicate them, if you can't engage people, if you can't get them to embrace them, if you can't motivate them to change, what's some of your best advice for those presentation skills for folks that want to get out and mix it up a little bit in this space, or even in their channel, but also we're talking about getting out and beyond that?
Look, I do think that knowing how to pitch ideas is key. And I think that that's what life's about, whether it's a president or whether it's the local glee club. The person who can present the best idea wins. And so for me, it's about knowing your content. It's about really not needing slides. It's about being able to tell stories that attach to them. And I mean, again, tomes have been written on this. So it's the type of thing we could probably spend an entire podcast on. But it's really about knowing your stuff to the point where you can deliver it without anything else by just speaking. So just like this conversation, we didn't prep, you didn't give me any questions. You asked me something, I have to be able to respond and sound cogent and sound intelligent so that the people who are listening to this believe in it. And I think presentation skills are no different.
Great. Last thing to wrap up with, I wanted to get your advice on learning. So I spend a lot of time, I'll listen to your podcast actually, and a host of others. We all read different material. I wanted to get the Mitch Joel tips for staying abreast. You're always on the cutting edge, connecting with people, learning. What are your secrets? What's your advice?
Yeah, I don't really have secrets. I just find the places and people who interest me the most, and I have a deep interest in that. I jokingly tell people I'm an infovore. That's what I do. I like finding information, consuming it, and if I can share it, I'm happy to share it. I also believe that some of the ways my skills have improved over the years is through critical thinking, and I love blogging because it allows me to critically think. So I just think you need sort of a place where you're collecting the information and reading the information you need, but you also need a place where you can share and express your emotions and your takes on it. And it's not always perfect, it's not always right, but you try. Over time, you'll sort of find the groove.
So a key element might be processing that information, not just finding it and intaking it in different formats, but also some discussion.
Yeah, I just haven't formalized the process, so I don't sort of spend time thinking cogently about how I'm processing. I just sort of consume a lot, and then stuff brews up to the top.
But if I read great books like yours here, and I put it on a shelf, and I just like knowing that stuff, that's great, but it would be far more useful if I take this and encourage somebody else to read it, or talk to somebody who, even if they haven't read it, to talk about these ideas, maybe over coffee, over lunch, some of those things. So I think not everybody's comfortable with blogging. I happen to run a blog, and it doesn't have a huge audience, but it serves me personally so well that it's worth doing, because it is that additional processing of committing to process and put a stake in the ground and push the button and publish something out there. But I think that's great advice in terms of just having discussions. If you're not going to be a blogger or a writer, or you don't want to do that publicly, maybe it's inviting somebody to lunch, talking about these ideas, talking about them at the workplace, something like that.
Yeah, conversations and sharing ideas is always a great way to expand your knowledge and get you thinking differently. There's no doubt about it. Digital channels just offer you a great chance to extend that beyond one or two people. You can share that tribal knowledge.
All right, well, thanks very much. I would like to recommend folks read the book Control Alt Delete. It is like having a conversation with you, and I wanted to thank you so much for all the conversations you have on your podcast. I enjoy listening in on them. I learn a lot. I hope folks will sign up for that too. 6 Pixels of Separation podcast. Any other information you want to give about folks, where to reach you, find more about Mitch Joel?
Sure, if you just go to www.twistimage.com/blog, I'm all there. And thanks so much for your time, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate it very much. Bye.